And so it was a, you started where their view was that the now wasn't that good. And asking them how would you want it to be was much more around wanting the respect of their opponents, wanting to be successful, wanting to be disciplined, wanting to be whatever you might want it to be. Because again, underpinning the work we do is that if no one changes, nothing changes. And sometimes, so trying to get a sense of what we want the future to look like, and if we've got a gap, work on it. And that's really where we live, in the gap between where we are and where we might want to get to. But all we're doing is making sure that that's not the work of only a well-meaning coach. That is the whole idea of the work we do, is to engage players in that process. If you're not going to engage them and you don't want their input, then don't ask their questions. Just go in, as some coaches will, tell them how they are and tell them what you're going to do to make them behave and make them perform. That has some pitfalls. I saw a coach, I was at a country footy club, and he was a new coach, and it was his first night at the club, and he was doing his spiel at the Meet the Coach night, and he started to get into things. He made an observation that the club he'd just been appointed to was pretty undisciplined, and there's a fair bit of work to do to improve you lot, and this is how it's going to happen. And then he started to reel things off, and one of the things I know is that drinking's a problem at this club. So there'll be no drinking after Wednesday night now that I'm coach. Well, you could hear people hitting the floor, and to me it was a really good example of the coach laying a law down which had little chance of success because the players weren't quite bought into it. They hadn't accepted at that stage that their behaviour was necessarily linked to the lack of success that they were actually having. And until you get players who say, yeah, because of the way we behave, that's the problem, so why don't we fix it? I reckon that's a really powerful step for a coach to take. Because the rules you set in place as a coach are only as good as the people who that are going to drive them. If you're the coach and you're at this particular club, what it would have meant when he made that rule is that he's going to have to scour the pubs of the pubs of that town Wednesday, Thursday and Friday night to make sure that players aren't there, but more importantly, probably find the houses and other places where they're now starting to drink instead of at the pub. So if it's only the coach who's going to take the responsibility for the driving of the standards, sometimes that can be a pretty tough and lonely sort of gig. And that's part of what we're trying to do here. If you can get an acknowledgement that how are we and how do we want to be, that's a good start point for me. The other thing that's worth exploring is that you don't want to just get caught, obviously, on a few key words. Straight underneath that, I think it's important that you attack behaviour, because in the end, that's the thing that drives culture in a place. If you're going to look at the culture of clubs, you only got to look at what they accept from one another or what they don't. And that varies enormously from club to club, in my view, not only at the elite level, but at any level. Because if you go to a club and you ask them, how do you see this club as opposed to this club as opposed to this club, usually they're different views of clubs. And that's partly because of that culture, and that's partly because of what we accept in terms of that behaviour within. So next questions that I've found useful to ask, are there any behaviours we accept in our club or in our team that are counterproductive, that just are no good? Don't try and fluff it up too much. So that's why it's getting to that point, and it's tough work for them, because usually there's a real point at which they understand, oh, now we're serious about this responsibility. The first bit is really the easy bit. I'm in the leadership group, and I can have a talk with the coach about selection and other things. This is quite a privileged position. When it comes back to challenge them is when there's something that's not right and they've got to deal with it. One of the examples that I was tied up with was where the leadership group had been put in place at the club fairly early days, and not long after they had a major problem with one of the senior players. And I met with the leadership group and I said, so what did you do? I said, oh no, he got fined. I said, yeah, no, the club does that. What else? Oh, he's been sent back to Premier League? Yeah, no, that. Coach did that. What did you do? Well, you can see him sitting there going, And one said, I reckon someone should talk to him. And I said, it sounds like it won't be you. And he said, I'd fucking prefer it not to be. And that was where he crunched headlong into what leadership's about. Now, the group agreed we should talk to the player. They got him in and they spoke to him as a group and said, look, mate, you've hurt the system. And it was the first time they'd actually got any real compliance from him. Because in the past, what they did was either let it slide or one poor joker was the one who went over and had a bit of a chip and then you're in, you're up for World War III. So that's what they get challenged with, and that's what, as a coach, you can support them through that. You don't just, again, it's not about them running the whole thing. They might come back with some recommendations. They might say, well, look, we reckon he's going to come into the line okay, and we've spoken to him, we're happy with that, and then you encourage them to keep stepping along, just managing their team. Now, again, I know that there'll be some of you going, never in a million years with me, Ray, and that's okay. If all that today's done is confirm that this is not what you're going to do, it's been a good day out for you. So, but it's that, how far can I go? How much can I engage my players with me in getting good performance in our team? For those of you that might sit in dual roles or have administration roles, I think you can see the extension pretty quickly straight up into administration, can't you? Ask the same questions about your club, not just your team. I'm talking about team here because you're coaches. But if you're talking about clubs, that's where administration can go through the same sort of thing. How are we seen as a club? How would we want to be? What are the behaviours we accept generally within our club that are counterproductive? And then go from there. And there's lots of other things we do along the way, but I reckon this is about the time where I draw breath. And you ask any questions you've got, particularly the ones where you would have a reservation or doubt. Yep.
Age. What age do you start?
I coached an under-16 team myself last year that actually had my son in it, so I got lots of feedback to the side as well. I did a little bit of this work with them around how do we want to be as a team and what are the behaviours, and actually got them to pick a leadership group, and I did meet with them occasionally. Once you get under probably 16, they find it pretty tough to, confront mates and that sort of stuff. So you help them more there. But they were quite comfortable with the idea of, referring back to those behaviours, using them at training. So 16 up, we do a reasonable amount of work in that elite under-18 competition in Victoria with the AFL, and certainly we push it pretty hard there. And the players there seem to accept that quite well, and are able to make the transition into the top level. So, yeah, I still try and sort of the middle to late teens still have a go. And as I said, it was good for me to have to just coach a team that was, just a local team, my home club, and have a practice at it. Does that answer you? Yep. Okay.
How would you handle it if a couple of your leadership group stepped out of line?
Ah, beautiful. Yeah, good question. If you've got someone within the leadership group that steps out of line, which has happened, they have to deal with it.
What do the members?
Yes. So, there was one where a member of the leadership group had stepped out of line, and the other leaders brought it to the attention of the group, and they dealt with that player. Now, what they did was actually give him a little bit of feedback around what they wanted him to stop doing, what they wanted him to start doing, and all the things they still wanted him to keep doing. So we use those key words in our reviews a lot. Anything we need to stop doing, anything we need to start doing, and what are the things we need to keep doing.